suggestion.
The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison there. Well, I was going to say let's bring in today's political panel, but one of our panellists has had to race back to the Senate chambers. Such are the joys of live TV. Liberal Amanda Stoker was seated here a couple of minutes ago, but has now run off to the chamber for a division. But Labor's Raff Ciccone managed to actually get a pair, so you're able to stay here with me now and chat for the next few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Now let's stick with the Gladys Liu issue. It certainly is dominating debate here in Canberra today. Are there racist undertones to Labor's attack, as the Prime Minister asserts?
Not at all, and I think it's quite disgraceful that the government would even go down that path. When a former senator from New South Wales, Sam Dastyari, came under the spotlight, he did the right thing and he resigned from the Senate. And yet now we've got the coalition who are trying to smear the Labor Party by us asking legitimate questions about some serious questions that the member for Chisholm actually needs to clarify. I know she put out a statement after her train wreck interview with Andrew Bolt, but to be honest, I think it's actually opened up more questions that she needs to ask.
We'll get back to Sam Dastyari in a second, but why, so she has provided a written statement clarifying her membership of these associations. Why is it so important for Labor to see her say this in the House of Representatives? What's the difference?
Well, I think it's always been the precedent that a member who comes under that type of scrutiny, given that we are talking about whether she, as a Member of Parliament, of the Australian Parliament, is fit and proper to stand in the Parliament, and is very appropriate, as our Shadow Attorney General has been arguing the case in the House of Representatives today. She needs to come to the Parliament, into the chamber, and explain to the people the full story.
We know that there are serious implications for politicians who mislead Parliament. Is that where you're going here, that you think perhaps that she has been dishonest, and by making a potentially dishonest statement before Parliament that she could get into some serious trouble?
Well, all parliamentarians, including myself, we have to declare any conflicts of interest, and that's something that she needs to do. And that hasn't happened, and she needs to explain to the people why.
Senator Penny Wong and Mark Dreyfus, the Shadow Attorney General, have released a statement a short time ago referring to the reports, saying these reports raise serious questions as to whether the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party have put winning marginal seats ahead of Australia's national security. That's a huge statement, isn't it?
Yes, but I mean, you have to look at what's at stake here. I mean, there are some serious national security issues that haven't been answered by the Prime Minister, by the government and by the member for Chisholm. And, the Shadow Attorney General, including the Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, have every right to be asking these questions.
Just with the Sam Dastyari case, the government has very much picked Labor up on this. Are they really comparable? I mean, Sam Dastyari, it was, there was hard evidence of his close links with Chinese donors. There was evidence of him actually towing the Chinese government's line over the South China Sea dispute. Now, Gladys Liu, there are questions to be answered here, questions to be asked and answered, but there hasn't really been a smoking gun yet, has there, that would, really justify calls for her to resign?
I think the two are very similar. In fact, some would even argue that her case is a lot more serious than Sam's. Sam did the right thing, and he took the decision that it was best in the interest of his integrity and that of the Senate, that he would resign from the Senate. We've legitimately asked questions in the House, and I'm sure we will in the Senate later today, about what else does the government actually know about the member for Chisholm's affairs.
All right, well, turning to your party, the Labor Party, we know that there is a big review going on as to every policy that's been on the table, but the climate change policy is in the headlines today. The Australian reporting that Labor is set to ditch its target to cut carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. That was a central plank of your climate change policy. How do you think Labor should proceed with this policy?
Look, I think it's not going to come as any surprise, but since the election, obviously the party's going through a process of review, and all our election commitments that we took at May 18 election is obviously under full review, and we'll have to scrutinise and go through the proper processes internally about where we go to in the lead up to the next election. Look, I guess it's no surprise that there were reports, and there will be reports about a range of other issues between now and the next election, but the party is committed to reviewing where we went wrong, and that means we have to look at a range of our commitments.
How much of a role do you think climate change played in your loss? Did it play any role, your policy?
I think we took very sound and measured policies to the election, and I don't think it's just one particular issue which resulted in us not winning the election, but certainly I think it's important for us to take a step back and to reflect without making any prejudged determination. Let's just go through this review process.
What's your view more broadly on climate change policies? Do you want to see Labor maintain an ambitious plan to cut emissions?
Labor's always been very strong on tackling climate change. In fact, it was the Labor Party that tried to propose and introduce an ETS. Unfortunately, it was the Greens that were playing politics here, and the Coalition have a long-standing record of obviously not supporting initiatives like the ETS and other climate change policies that would actually bring down and reduce, our pollutions in the country. So I think for the Labor Party, we've got a very strong record when it comes to climate change.
And you'd like to see that maintained?
Yes, I would.
And just back to the story that's been around today about that 45% emissions reduction target by 2030. Given that the next election's in 2022, is it actually pragmatic to not have such an ambitious emissions reduction target, given that you'd only have about 8 years to implement it?
And I think that's sort of part of the reason why a lot of these policies that we took will need to come under review and see whether it's actually achievable to get to these certain targets. So it's not just about that one particular issue that was reported on the front page of the Australian today, but it'd be a range of issues as well too. And who knows where we'll be, in 2 to 3 years' time as well. So I think it's a very sound and sensible position to take that we'd certainly review all our policies.
And just finally, one of the bills that's actually going to be likely passed this week is the kind of the vegan activist legislation. This is legislation aimed at stopping activists from trespassing on farms or broadcasting addresses of farmers for their fellow protesters to go and protest on. We know that Labor had misgivings about this legislation, but will ultimately vote for it. How comfortable are you with that?
Well, and I think it's part of the reason why that Senator Amanda Stoker is not here with us today, because she's probably had to run down to vote on that particular bill, which is in committee stage. And look, the Labor Party and the Coalition obviously are very bipartisan in this approach in supporting our farmers.
But we know that in caucus on Tuesday, some MPs, we know Kim Carr, right, your Senate colleague, he's not in favour of these laws at all. There were some amendments that Labor was going to move, but ultimately, if they failed, you were going to back the bill.
We've tried with the amendments, and obviously we don't have the numbers in the chamber. So, I would rather see us support our farmers. There have been some concerns raised, but look, I think overall it is a good package, and it certainly does support our farming industry. At the end of the day, we just cannot afford to have people illegally trespass on private agricultural land and, but quite frankly, treat farmers with disdain.
Do we need these laws though? Don't we already have trespass laws? Isn't that already a criminal offence?
Look, we do, but this also addresses online activity. So, websites that actually encourage people, incite violence, encourage people to go in the middle of the night and create all sorts of havoc on farmland. And to be honest, these activists are actually causing more harm than good when it comes to the welfare of animals. I mean, there have been a lot of cases, and a number of senators spoke about this in the chamber today, about the number of deaths and the stress that it causes to livestock on farmland. So I think it's important that people really need to read the transcript in the Hansard today and from the last couple of days, and you can actually see the full-scale impact that these activists actually have. And it goes contrary to, I guess, what they're trying to advocate.
So it sounds like while some of your colleagues may have had misgivings, you actually back this bill.
The caucus supports it. It's not just me. This is the rest of the caucus that supports it. And look, I know there have been some discussions about trying to get amendments up, and we've tried. Today we tried. I moved an amendment. It wasn't successful, but that's just the reality of this place. You can't get the numbers, but does that mean that the intent of the bill should also be defeated? And I don't think it should. I think it is a good bill, but it does need a lot of work.
All right, Raff Ciccone, thank you so much for your time today and for continuing in the midst of our panellists having to escape. But
I'm sure we can catch up with Amanda another time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can join her in the Senate now.